For the first minute of this guide, stay with me, because what happened began with a moment of pure frustration. One every gardener, homesteader, or backyard grower eventually hits. I was standing over a patch of clay soil so dense and lifeless that even weeds refused to grow there. It wasn't just poor soil. It was the kind of heavy, compacted earth that history books describe as the bane of early settlers, the type that breaks wooden tools, suffocates roots, and turns to concrete the second it dries. I had amended, watered, tilled, and pleaded with this soil for seasons. It didn't budge. Then, in a moment of impatience, I buried one kitchen scrap, not a pile, not a trench full, just a single, overlooked piece of organic matter. And within a day, the soil had changed in a way that didn't make sense until later. What I saw shocked me, not because the scrap itself was extraordinary, but because of what it triggered in that dead clay. It wasn't magic. It was biology waking up, biology that had been silent for years. And the moment you understand what that scrap did, you'll never look at clay soil the same way again. The transformation began with the way clay responds to concentrated decomposition. The kitchen scrap I buried was nothing more than the core of a cabbage. Not chopped, not composted, not blended, just the core, intact. Clay soil responds differently to decomposition than looser soils. When a concentrated piece of organic matter starts breaking down inside dense clay, it creates a small pocket of microbial activity. Clay, being tight and moisture-retentive, traps that activity in place. The heat, gases and moisture generated by early decomposition cannot escape easily, and that creates a microenvironment unlike anything on the soil's surface. By the next morning, the soil above the buried scrap looked different. It was softer, slightly raised, and darker. When I pressed my fingers into it, the structure had shifted. The clay wasn't loose, but it had begun to fracture in natural lines. Something had activated. To apply this effectively, dig a hole 6 inches deep, place the intact kitchen scrap, like a cabbage core, melon rind, banana peel bundle, or handful of wilted greens, into the bottom and cover it with soil. Water gently. The clay will seal in the moisture, letting the decomposition process intensify. The reason this works is that clay soil desperately needs biological ignition. Dead clay soil isn't just nutrient poor, it is biologically dormant. The particles are so tightly packed that oxygen cannot move, microbes cannot breathe, and organic matter cannot break down. But burying a dense piece of organic material forces the decomposition process to begin from the inside. As microbes multiply on the buried scrap, they begin spreading outward. These microbes release acids that naturally separate clay particles, improving structure almost immediately. This is something our ancestors understood on instinct. Before commercial fertilizers existed, they buried fish heads, potato peels, cabbage leaves, and even entire buckets of food waste directly into planting mounds. They weren't feeding the plants first. They were feeding the soil life, knowing the soil life would then feed the plants. Clay soil responds faster than sand or loam because once microbes take hold, the clay holds them in place like a biological incubator. If you want to test this, bury the scrap and check the soil after 24 hours. You'll feel the early softening. After a week, you'll find the clay developing cracks that feel natural, not dry. After a month, that one scrap will have created a pocket of humus and worm activity. The scrap acts as a worm beacon in ways compost on the surface never can. What surprised me most was how quickly worms arrived. Clay soil usually repels worms because it suffocates them. But worms are drawn to fermentation gases and microbial heat. Once the scrap begins decomposing internally, the worms detect it through the soil, and they tunnel directly toward it. Their movement alone begins breaking up the clay. Their castings enrich it. Their tunneling aerates the surrounding area. This is why a single buried kitchen scrap has a magnified effect in clay. You're not just adding organic matter, you're recruiting the workforce that will rewrite the soil structure permanently. For practical use, bury these scraps every foot or so in problem areas. Within one growing season, you will have created a patchwork of worm-fed channels that turn concrete-like soil into fertile ground. The real magic happened when moisture met biology inside the clay. Clay is famous for holding water, but dead clay holds it in a suffocating way. When biology wakes up inside clay, the moisture begins to distribute more evenly. The decomposition process releases humic compounds that bind clay particles into aggregates. These aggregates allow air pockets to form. Those pockets hold moisture without drowning roots. It's the beginning of structure, something clay doesn't naturally have. After burying that one scrap, I noticed that water no longer sat on the surface. It sank in, slowly but fully. The next rainfall left the soil darker for longer. These were signs of structural change far beyond the scrap itself. What the scrap did was kickstart a chain reaction the clay had been waiting for. To amplify this effect, water the area deeply once after burying the scrap. Then let the soil's natural moisture retention do its job. What shocked me most was how fast clay soil can shift when given the right catalyst. Within just 30 days, the area where I'd buried the scrap had turned into a soft, workable zone. Not perfect soil, but completely different from the lifeless clay around it. It held together, yet crumbled. It supported root penetration. It smelled alive. This was the same result older gardeners achieved with buried food waste pits, trench composting and traditional planting mounds. None of it was modern. All of it was reliable. That single scrap didn't fix the soil. It woke it up. And once clay wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep easily. This method is perfect for anyone working with heavy, unforgiving clay. It requires no machinery, no additives, and no deep tilling. Just the patience to feed the soil from the inside. If this guide helped you and you want more old-world, practical, historically grounded soil wisdom that actually works, subscribe to HydraHaven and share this video with fellow growers. Keeping this knowledge alive matters just as much as using it.